NBA free agency went crazy since the last episode, so it was only right for this week's show I discuss most of the signings and trades that shook the NBA world. But here's the catch. I will be taking these offseason moves and giving out awards, pairing them with several of the categories we often see across shows like the Grammys or the BET Awards. We've been able to sit on the latest news and let it marinate for over a week now, and so I didn't want to just merely share my thoughts on each situation when shows like Zach Lowe's and Numbers on the Board, countless team-specific podcasts, and obviously so many major network shows have already done the exact same thing. So I sat back. How can I separate myself while still offering my own analysis? Well, we gotta do it H2DG style. So consider this my preseason best hip hop artist or best offseason acquisition, best producer or best executive, and more, as we're gonna explore just how much the art of rap can meet the reality of NBA free agency. Get ready for the most unique free agency recap so far that you've heard right now on Hip to the Games. Welcome to Hip to the Games, the podcast for you, the basketball junkie and the hip hop head. I'm your host Desmond, and I too have had hoop dreams and enjoy the beautiful genre of hip hop and its history. Together, we will enjoy some of the greatest albums, songs, artists, players, moments, teams, and so much more, while even mixing the two on occasion, all in my hope that you remember why you love both or either of these to begin with. You'll soon understand that Hip to the Games is more than just a podcast. It's a lifestyle. And if you were looking for a platform that combines both basketball and hip hop, you've come to the right place. They play my kind of basketball. A lot of layers to this song if you're really paying attention. Here's a huge shout out to you for being hip to the games. Welcome to this episode of Hip to the Games. Shout out to you if you are a loyal listener and are showing that you are indeed H2DG certified by listening or tuning in visually for another episode. Whether you are listening on your favorite platform or watching on YouTube, I sincerely thank you for your support. And if you do happen to be new to H2DG, welcome. I am happy to have you here. If throughout this episode you do like what you're hearing, be sure to hit that subscribe or follow button on whatever platform you're listening to or watching on to stay tapped in with all things hip to the games. And before we really get into today's show, you already know the drill. I gotta get my pregame shoutouts out the way, okay? The first one always goes to the creative director, Jesus Christ, for another H2DG episode, as it's always a blessing to get in front of this microphone and do what he's placed in my heart to do. And the second one goes to my 19 Media Group family for the opportunity to represent the home team. You always see that blue and white logo sitting in the corner. That's my squad. So be sure to follow 19M Group on Twitter, 19 Media Group on YouTube, 19 Media Group on Instagram to just follow everything going on with the network. We have a variety of shows around sports, music, education, culture, hosted by some passionate independent podcasters and teammates of mine. And I'm sure you can find another show to support, whether it's through likes, comments, reposts, listens, buying merch. Trust me when I tell you, any kind of support is seen and appreciated. Now, as we get into today's show, given the nature of the award show format, the flow is going to be pretty simple as I'll usher in each category with nominees, followed by an overview of the changes each team made this summer before choosing a winner. As always, I strongly encourage you to participate in the comments if you are watching on YouTube, or share your reactions with me directly on the socials, whether that's under the social media clips that I post, whatever kind of way it is in the DMs, I'm all for it. You can share your thoughts on there as well. But without further ado, let me introduce each category because I think we got a pretty hefty but fun episode today. You've heard of the Heisman Trophy, the Lombardi Trophy, and more recently the Michael Jordan MVP Trophy. These awards are reserved for the best of the best, whether for an individual or a team. And it's no different for the first ever Hip to the Games Free Agency Awards, as I pay homage to arguably the best to ever do it across emceeing and business, arguably the greatest of all time, Sean Carter, aka Jay-Z, and virtually hand off the Hovito Award to the best free agency signing, or you could say best offseason acquisition. But what is hip hop without the producers that provide the canvases for MCs to paint extraordinary pictures? It's one thing to craft an instrumental, but a whole other skill to be able to bring out the best of artists lyrically, challenge their pen and their delivery, and know how to take a song from a 7 to a 10. Few did that better than Dr. Dre, and the Dr. Dre Award will be given to the best executive who orchestrated the acquisition or acquisitions that made their team better. Speaking of making a team better, these next two awards may be similar in nature but show love to different effects of the free agency process. This third award is named after the album that has essentially become the blueprint for success. With hard beats, flawless rhymes, vivid storytelling, and no skips, Nasir Jones changed the game in 1994 by checking all the boxes in his debut project. This is the Illmatic Award, which goes to the best team post-free agency. That said, not everybody's first album is iconic. Some MCs have to recover from an underwhelming debut and do everything they can to stamp themselves on album number 2. After a quiet debut, respectable but quiet debut, we saw the Fugees shoot up the charts in a stacked class of 1996 and create one of the best albums that year with The Score, taking their stardom as well as their art to new heights. This is the Fugeela Award, which goes to the most improved team. And getting back to individual performances, some are so memorable that an artist or group is known for one song for the rest of their lives. Think Sir Mix-a-Lot's Baby Got Back, or what is likely my personal favorite, Cali Swag District's Teach Me How to Dougie. Ain't nothing wrong with having a track that's always going to keep that money coming in. The One Hit Wonder Award goes to the player/team that could benefit the most from a one-year deal. As always, each year we're bound to see some albums and artists that end up flying under the radar. Just like in the NBA, there are some deals that you definitely missed if you blinked, yet they end up bringing in some of the most impactful results. Or maybe you saw the headline, but didn't understand just how impactful it would turn out on the court. The Underground Award shows love to the most underrated acquisition of free agency. And lastly, in an industry that's always talking, it's hard to be an artist and not keep a chip on your shoulder. Oftentimes we see just how the constant chatter and critique from doubters, haters, and critics affects an artist, good and bad. Not to mention, hip-hop had to fight to be accepted as a culture and not merely a trend that would come and go. The Underdog Award goes to the acquisition who has the most to prove this season. Now, obviously, just like any award show, some players/teams may fit in multiple categories, so don't be surprised if you hear a name more than once. But let's tip it off with the nominees for the Hovito Award going to the best offseason acquisition. Kevin Durant of the Houston Rockets, Cam Johnson of the Denver Nuggets, Miles Turner of the Milwaukee Bucks, and Jalen Green of the Phoenix Suns. Now, I will tell you from the jump that this looks like a fight between Kevin Durant and Cam Johnson, in my opinion. However, I don't want you to sleep on the other two names in Miles Turner and Jalen Green. Let's start with the latter. Jalen Green is the epitome of a hooper. The athleticism is off the charts, the handle is reminiscent of prime Bradley Beal, and the shot creation just continues to grow. And I believe his time in Houston has turned him into a better on-ball defender. He probably would have been an all-star this past year if he played how he did in January and February, in November and December as well. He was that good, I think. On a team fueled by defense, he looked to be the scorer on the perimeter that would likely take them over the edge, but unfortunately, that didn't pan out as his playoff struggles convinced the Rockets that he wouldn't be the guy that they needed to get them where they wanted to be. So they traded him to Phoenix for Kevin Durant. While I don't think it's the best fit that he's in Phoenix right now, as of now, it looks like he's staying put and going to be the co-star to Devin Booker. As it looks like the Suns are going to retool their core after an underwhelming season, starting by bringing in some youth and talent in Jalen Green. I guess I do like that part, right? They get a little younger and they get somebody who can still be on the team. Say they were to move on from Devin Booker, they would still have Jalen Green to fall back on as a go-to scorer for their team. And like I said, while I may not be the biggest fan of the fit, at the end of the day, Jalen Green presents the opportunity to coexist with Devin Booker as a go-to scorer and forge a dynamic scoring duo, especially with Brad Beal moving on after the KD trade as well. So it certainly sounds exciting given the kind of player Jalen Green can still develop into. But once again, I'm curious to see how it fits if the Suns are all in on this situation. That said, I do think a lot of people have been very hard on Jalen Green. I get it. He's number 2 pick in the draft. and everything like that. But I think a lot of people have been hard on him as if every player is supposed to have it all figured out by their fourth year. I think this new situation can be good for him, and that the trade can inspire him to develop into the player that the Rockets didn't have faith he'd become. Obviously, you trade for Kevin Durant 10 times out of 10, don't get me wrong, but still, if you're Jalen Green, you have to see this as an opportunity to further extend your skill set and become the player everybody doesn't think you can become. Now, next up is Miles Turner, the face-up big man with a knack to block shots. All eyes were on him this summer, as it was unclear for most of the year whether or not the Indiana Pacers were willing to spend that bread and pay him his well-earned money for 10 years of service, ending with a finals appearance. On the surface, he seemed to check all the boxes, right? Outlasted trade rumors, spent a decade with one team, and most of all, finally played a key role in a near championship for the Indiana Pacers. Unfortunately, I believe the Pacers were turned off by his struggles shooting the basketball during the NBA Finals and didn't want that to become a lingering issue should they make more deep playoff runs in the future. From what I've seen from Pacer fans, I feel like fans have a way of speaking things into existence. I've said this before. I think fans have a lot more influence than we often think. So I think when you think about the Pacers situation, I think that was it. A little bit. I think that was it. While Turner was, for obvious reasons, all in on re-signing with Indy, according to Shams, the Pacers didn't want to pay the luxury tax to keep him around. Now you can take that as you wish, right? Either the Pacers are finding an excuse to move on from Miles, or the Pacers are following their longtime values of building really good teams as cheap as they possibly can. And then, even with that said, it came out from Kevin Pritchard, I believe. He was saying, we were ready to pay Miles Turner, and he already signed with the Bucks and didn't give us a chance to match that offer. So I think there's a lot of back and forth with this situation. It's still fuzzy. Obviously, we have yet to hear from Miles Turner, so that'll be interesting to see what he says. But yeah, it's just a weird situation going on with Indy, especially, like I said, after this successful playoff run that they've had. Either way, Miles Turner made sure to get his bread, no matter what uniform he was wearing, and he simultaneously threw a jab at the Indiana Pacers by joining their division rival in the Milwaukee Bucks, a team that they've run into the past two postseasons. So to me, it was a great decision by Miles Turner because the Bucks had just lost Brook Lopez to the Clippers, so they needed a stretch big badly, as the Bucks offense thrives with a shooting big man next to Giannis Antetokounmpo, because Giannis is such a dynamic player. He can bring the ball up the floor, things of that nature. He's not always going to be in the paint. He needs a stretch big to balance out his skill set. So they get that Miles Turner. And when you compare the skill sets of Miles Turner and Brook Lopez, they are indeed very similar. Neither of them are fantastic rebounders, but both are able to protect the paint. Although you can make the argument that Brook Lopez is a little more stout. He's a little stronger interior than Miles, and not just blocking shots, right? Just literally stonewalling defenders and altering shots, being an intimidator. But funny enough, as of last season, Miles' defensive field goal percentage for shots less than 10 and 6 feet, respectively, is lower than Brook's, meaning opponents are more prone to be affected by Turner's contests around the paint. So the stats say otherwise, but I just think either way, you can't go wrong with having these two guys in the paint. The eye test has shown us for years now that both of these guys can protect the rim. Additionally, Miles Turner is more than capable of stretching the floor. We know this. In fact, he actually prefers that as his bread and butter offensively. But the difference between Brook Lopez is that he is younger. Miles is a lot more younger. He's more mobile, so he can do a little bit more with the ball in terms of step back jumpers and aggressive drives to the basket. We've seen him dunk on dudes' heads. He brings a little bit more to the table. But with that in mind, I think the Bucks breathe a sigh of relief after successfully replacing the big man that helped them capture their 2021 championship. So good on Milwaukee, good on Miles Turner. He got his bread, and they got their big man. Then we got sharpshooter Cam Johnson, who was traded to the Denver Nuggets. Many of us thought that he would have been traded during this past season's deadline, but when that didn't happen, you just knew the offseason was going to be the next best chance to get Cam Johnson. And lo and behold, with several moves made this summer, the Denver Nuggets have made the exact changes I urged them to make in my conference finals preview episode. They indeed acquired the shooting that is necessary to surround Nikola Jokic with, so defenses aren't as eager and aren't as willing to leave their matchups to double or even triple team him, like we saw versus OKC. Cam has contributed on playoff teams. He's a very wise player. His interviews are excellent, and his mindset as a shooter reveals how much of a student of his craft that he is. He shot 39% from deep the past 2 seasons, with 40% averages from deep from 2021 to 2023. So he has shown to be an accurate shooter in the league on a contending team in the Phoenix Suns a few years ago, and a rebuilding team in the Nets. So he's had pretty much the best of both worlds. No matter the role or situation, he's able to maintain his efficiency. Additionally, I think a situation like Brooklyn required him to do a little bit more with the basketball. So similar to what happened to Mikal Bridges, I think growing off the dribble, having to get to the free throw line just a little bit extra, having to get a little extra responsibility and experience on a bad team, that's only going to help the next time he finds himself on a contender. And lo and behold, Cam Johnson is able to be more than a shooter on this Nuggets team. Like, hey, I had to put the ball on the floor a few times in Brooklyn. I can add some of that to this situation too, right? Unlike Phoenix, where Chris Paul and Devin Booker did a majority of the ball handling. In Denver, I anticipate that Cam is going to get the rock and occasionally have to make a play, so his stint in Brooklyn should give him some of that extra confidence to contribute beyond just catch and shoot threes, even in small ways. Cam was one of the highly touted free agents because shooting is so valuable today, and I'm really glad that he's able to go to a contender out west like the Nuggets, where he'll fit seamlessly, especially with a high IQ player like Nikola Jokic. I really think it's a match made in heaven. And lastly, is Kevin Durant. I mean, what else is there to say? Future Hall of Famer, the most naturally gifted scorer we've ever seen, even in his late 30s. I talked about it last episode, so I'll keep it brief, but the Rockets got their bucket getter and still were able to keep their defensive pieces and young, up-and-coming pieces around him. We knew that he was set to be traded, so he was easily the best available piece this offseason. I don't know where this notion kind of came from, that KD is not that guy anymore, or he can't lead a team, or what have you, but it couldn't have been further from the truth. He's still putting up 27, 6, and 4, still over a block a game. I always said that Kevin Durant has been one of the most underrated backline defenders since joining the Warriors in 2016. I would even go as far as saying he's been one of the more underrated defenders in general since 2012. Obviously, these days he isn't as quick or as spry as he used to be, but he can still do a decent job, especially in an era that has fully embraced small ball lineups. Still well over 50% from the field. Just came off his second best three-point percentage of his career with 43% accuracy. One of the best plug-and-play players we've ever seen. The dude is cold, and the Rockets will certainly be looking to dethrone the Thunder with his addition. But there can only be one winner of the Hovito Award, and while I actually think it's a bit closer than you would think, the Hovito Award for Best Offseason Acquisition goes to Kevin Durant. A pretty easy decision for obvious reasons. I didn't want to take the whole episode to belabor the point, but I'm just really excited for Cam Johnson in Denver. Man, he was really a close second for me, but with a talent like Kevin Durant, that one was more obvious. The next award is the Dr. Dre Award for the executive that came through with the best and most impactful moves for their franchise. The nominees are as follows: Denver Nuggets GM Ben Tenzer, Rockets GM Raphael Stone, Hawks GM Anzi Salah, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, probably not, but the Hawks GM and the Clippers GM Trent Redden. As I stated earlier, the Nuggets filled a lot of the holes they needed to fill after their semifinals loss versus the Thunder. Not only did they trade for Cam Johnson, but they also stole Tim Hardaway Jr. from Detroit, who had a bit of a resurgence last season after dealing with injuries, and is still an experienced shooter that should get tons of looks being around Nikola Jokic. At 37% from the field, 37% from deep. He's not necessarily an elite shooter as much as he is a streaky shooter, but I think what sells him is his confidence. He has a lot of that irrational confidence that makes the good and great shooters who they are. Wide open, contested, deep, close. He shoots it the same way every time. You have to respect it. Then, in sudden fashion, it was previously announced that Russell Westbrook wouldn't be returning to the Nuggets despite a pretty impactful season, so that opened the door for them to reunite with Bruce Brown, who was a part of the 2023 championship team. He's been on 3 teams since then and hasn't been the healthiest, so it's a bit of a risk in that regard, but I think sometimes, especially as fans, we tend to forget how important culture and fit is. Denver was the franchise that he won a championship with. He fit great as a short roll option despite being a smaller wing because he was able to hit the floater in the lane or make the pass to the right shooter. You expect that they are seeking to revive a lot of that chemistry this season, this upcoming season. Bruce averaged 11, 4, and 3, and 1 steal in 2022-23, and it led him to getting paid that offseason when he went to Indy and put up similar numbers before being traded to Toronto, and then traded again this past year to the Pelicans. So, again, I think it's a rhythm thing. Bruce Brown goes into training camp without a learning curve, back in a more familiar, home-like environment because he won a championship the lone season he was there. You know, he hasn't been able to stick with a team ever since, and they're going to need his services since they lost Westbrook. It could very well be the move that revives his career a little bit and helps the Nuggets get closer to the top again. And they also traded for Jonas Valanciunas, as I was super excited for his contributions because he's still a great rebounder in this league, still has the combination of a face-up and back-to-basket game, and has stretched his jump shot to the three-point arc, and he was used in dribble handoff actions very well in Washington and Sacramento. So I felt like he was a perfect backup to Nikola Jokic. Unfortunately, there was some back and forth after he decided that he was going to go back and play in Greece and leave the NBA, so that big man hole kind of reappeared. But as of now, it looks like the Nuggets are putting their foot down, like, nah, you're going to play for us, you're going to honor this contract and help us win a championship. So I'm kind of glad they did that. It was great to see DeAndre Jordan play some meaningful backup minutes again this past season, but he still somehow was deemed unplayable during the OKC series when I felt like they needed him more in that series. So I'm glad they went after a backup that they actually plan to use and that they actually should be able to use come playoff time. But nonetheless, I thought they made some real nice moves this summer. Like I said, getting Cam Johnson, getting Bruce Brown, and getting Valanciunas, and of course Tim Hardaway Jr. as well. You get your shooters, you get your big man, and you get a Westbrook replacement. So who is familiar with the offense. So I thought it was a great job by Denver. Up next is the Houston Rockets, who made you think that they found a money tree in Houston. I mean, from being able to extend Steven Adams for 3 years, trade for an expensive superstar in Kevin Durant, and only give up Dylan Brooks and Jalen Green and the 10th pick in this year's draft, which ended up being Kaman, right, the center, who's actually in Phoenix now, and 5 second-round picks. Then they extend Jabari Smith Jr. to a 5-year, $122 million deal. They signed Dorian Finney-Smith for 4 years, $53 million, and reunite with Clint Capella for 3 years, $21.5 million. And it just seemed like there was going to be some investigations going on because these are all players that could easily have looked for opportunities to get paid elsewhere. And they all on the same team? Something is a little fishy. Is there a little under the table stuff going on? But either way, the trades are official and they did it legit, okay? And I think especially when you look at the big man situation, right? Let's start there because they were already pretty much well off with Sengun and Steven Adams rotating the 5 with a variety of options at the power forward spot, being able to go small ball if they wanted to, right? Or go Jabari, who is 6'10", more traditional size-wise. But see, this is what happens when traditional lineups get popular again. Right? Notice how OKC, despite the value that Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein can bring, there were times they both got benched. And as a result, they had to play Jalen Williams at the 5. J-Dub Jalen Williams at the 5. So what did they do in this year's draft? They drafted a big man in Thomas Sorber. So when they find themselves in that position again, they'll have an extra body to throw out there, even if it's for no more than 8 to 12 minutes a night. You look at Dallas being able to play Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford, and Anthony Davis, all different kind of ways and combinations. You look at the Phoenix Suns getting Mark Williams, Nick Richards, and the draft pick, right? Come on. And now the Rockets, who have some of the best rotations in the league, I think. Now, again, as NBA fans, we just forget that the game moves in cycles, in my opinion. While in different ways, we're seeing the big man become important again. Look how many were chosen in the draft this year. While I would love for them to have a lot more of a low post game, that's a whole different episode, different conversation. I do think that you need these guys that are going to be able to guard the Wembys, the Jokic's, the Embiids, the Zach Edey's, and not need help doing so. You need guys that are going to fight with the Cavs, the Thunder, and the Mavericks on the glass, keeping up with those bigger lineups. Small ball might be great for offensive fluidity, but have fun losing the rebound battle or getting dominated by the opposing team's inside presence. The Rockets have done a lot of work in their front court because they now have quite a few versatile guards and wings to work with. So kudos to the front office for getting some real impact players on board. And then we got the Atlanta Hawks, who similarly continue to surround Trae Young with shooting and or defense after trading for Kristaps Porzingis, signing Nickeil Alexander-Walker, whose value increased after his 3-and-D kind of impact in Minnesota, and then sharpshooter Luke Kennard. And let's not forget how dangerous the Atlanta Hawks looked towards the end of the NBA Cup this past season. Unfortunately, the injury to Jalen Johnson kind of changed their season for the worst, pretty much, but they made strides in surrounding Trae Young with versatile defenders and playmakers in Johnson, Dyson Daniels, Zachary Ricochet through the draft and offseason moves. So if you're the Atlanta Hawks, it's like, so what? Our point guard is 6 feet and gets picked on when we're on defense. We got athleticism, we got shooting, and we got defense to make up for what he struggles with. That is how you rebuild. That is how you improve. So this year, when you add Alexander Walker to that core and Porzingis as a lob threat for Trae Young, someone who can protect the rim and stretch the floor, if this team can stay healthy, premature predictions see them as one of the favorites, if not the favorite, to come out of the Eastern Conference. And even touching on Luke Kennard, I don't think people realized what his brief time in Los Angeles did for his career. If you remember, he came to a Los Angeles Clippers team that was trying to contend for championships, and with him coming from the Pistons, who were still in their dark days as a franchise, he was scared to shoot, he was scared to make mistakes, he couldn't put the ball on the floor, and he struggled to defend. So he quickly became unplayable. But the following season, again, injuries to Paul George, Kawhi, other guys, he was able to find some minutes and he bounced back. He bounced back with a certain bounce in his step and a fire a little bit. He got confident in his shot again. He became the most accurate shooter in the league. He got comfortable with his handle, which gave him the ability to shoot off the dribble as well as play sort of like a combo guard. Again, we saw flashes of that in Detroit. He returned back to that. And while he still has his defensive limitations, he transferred a lot of these skills to Memphis and now will be a great fit in Atlanta, bringing the same attributes. Again, I don't think he'll play no more than 12 minutes, I would say, on the lower end, but those spot minutes he gets where he can extend a scoring run to end a quarter or a half, or knock down clutch free throws, or provide a spark when they start a game cold, those are going to be very important for a team that wants to make noise in the East. So the Hawks, to me, were yet another team who expanded on some of their holes from the past season. And then the last nominee is the LA Clippers, who cooked a little bit this offseason. All right, first they signed Brook Lopez in free agency, and finally, if I hit my Vince Carter, they finally get a suitable backup big man for Ivica Zubac. He can protect the rim just as well as Zubac. He still has solid back to the basket game, but really turned into a stretch big over the years. So he also brings an attribute that Zubac doesn't have. That acquisition was one of my favorites of the summer. Then, more recently, they traded Norman Powell to the Heat for John Collins in a 3-team deal. And I'll admit, I hated to see Norm go because he was such a spark plug for the Clippers in his tenure there. But I understand that once Kawhi returned and the Clippers were healthy, he wasn't as impactful as you'd like him to be. So the Clippers instead bring in another forward to increase their front court depth. And to me, I think it should allow guys like Kawhi and Derrick Jones specifically to play their natural small forward positions that they weren't always able to play in different lineups the past year. I do worry just a tad about John Collins, though, and how he fits next to Kawhi, specifically because John likes the ball in the high and mid post, very similar to Kawhi Leonard. And so when they find themselves on the floor together, you anticipate that Kawhi is going to get a lot more of those touches. That was the issue with Paul George as a Clipper. If you noticed, he rarely got his touches in that T-Mac area. Unless Kawhi Leonard was out of the game, that was pretty much that was the only time Paul George was getting his T-Mac touches. Again, growing up in that era where that was still the style of basketball you played, right? Where a lot of those wings, they love it in that spot. Paul George didn't get a lot of those, so he had to find other ways to get in rhythm. Thankfully, though, I would think for John Collins, obviously playing a different position, a different skill set, he should be able to excel as a pick and roll man, a pick and pop man, and a cutter for alley-oops and just easy baskets easy buckets by the basket, excuse me. I think it won't be a major problem, but it is just something I'm watching for. But here's where I think it really gets interesting. Okay, I got to get a little ahead of myself, even though at least at the time of me recording this, it hasn't been official, but this is what the streets are saying. The Clippers, even with those two moves, they're still in play to get Chris Paul in what will be a reunion for his last chance to win a championship, right? He stressed the idea of staying closer to his family and so forth. So when the Clippers acquired John Collins, my first thought was they had to get another lob threat for CP. This was a Chris Paul move right here. Yeah, Zubac can catch lobs occasionally. Derrick Jones is airplane mode. We know he can catch lobs. But John Collins, the way that he can potentially be used in similar, just not the exact same, but just similar ways we saw Blake Griffin be used in his days with CP3 when they were on the Clippers together. This roster has Chris Paul orchestration written all over it. And still, after trading Norman Powell, there is a hole for a shooting guard, and they will have money to sign Bradley Beal should he get bought out by the Phoenix Suns. Now, obviously, the big issue with Bradley Beal has been his health, but he's still a really good three-point shooter, still really good off the dribble, and because he's had experience not being the number one option before, he fits better in this starting lineup than Norman Powell, who again had a bit of trouble finding his flow once Kawhi came back and they had a fully healthy roster. So I think getting Lopez, Collins, and likely Chris Paul and Bradley Beal, the Clippers fill a lot of those holes that they had this past season. Again, I feel like people are, you might be a little scared of the Brad Beal acquisition, because I was too. Trust me, like I said, I really wanted Norman to stay. But I just think because Norman was so much of an on-ball spark plug, at the very least, Bradley Beal has experience being a catch-and-shoot guy. He came into the league as a catch-and-shoot guy. Let's not forget, Bradley Beal didn't really develop into that go-to scorer until the late 2010s, if anything, that 2020 season, if I'm correct. So I think the Brad Beal replacing Norman Powell situation isn't that bad. But again, they get their backup big man in Lopez. They get some extra rebounding and strength in their front court with John Collins. They potentially get Chris Paul, who is still a mid-range maestro, still a high IQ player, awesome floor general to have. And they potentially get Bradley Beal, who can operate off the catch and off the dribble, which will strengthen their need for buckets on the perimeter when Kawhi sits and or when Harden is having an off night. If for whatever reason Bradley Beal doesn't go to the Clippers, I still believe the Clippers made some excellent improvements to a roster that I was already super high on this past season, even if it doesn't show as much in the standings due to being in a tight Western Conference. But again, only one GM can get the Dr. Dre Award for impeccable offseason orchestration. Not on the soundboards, but the whiteboards for sure. And that GM to me is Raphael Stone of the Houston Rockets. Listen, I had to think about this one. Okay, as far as offseason targets, getting who you want, it's a no-brainer to me. The Nuggets and the Clippers were very, very, very close. And the Hawks did a great job, but there's still some questions with Porzingis' health, although I did see his post on Instagram where he allegedly said he's been feeling great, so we'll see. I just thought Houston's acquisitions were more set in stone, ready to make an impact kind of moves, and that's why I gave them the slight edge, but it was close. Trust me, it was close. I know the first two H2DG offseason awards went to Houston, but don't you worry. There are still a handful of awards left to give out, and trust me when I tell you, it only gets more and more interesting as the episode continues. With the Hovito and the Dr. Dre awards down, we get into the Illmatic, Fuji La, and One Hit Wonder awards next. But before we transition, if you're enjoying Hip to the Game so far, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I don't know what you keep waiting for. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Hit that follow button on your audio platforms. Hit that link in the show notes to follow the socials to stay tapped in and outside of the podcast. And even after all of that, if you still want to take your support further, here's how you can show some love and represent the H2DG lifestyle. As a fan of Hip to the Games, not only should you show your love for the podcast, but you gotta express your love for basketball and hip hop. With a wide variety of clothing and accessories, there is always a way to show how much the game of basketball and the game of rap means to you. Let everybody know what it means to be hip to the games by clicking the link in the episode's description to cop some merch and represent the H2DG lifestyle. Welcome back to Hip to the Games, where the first ever free agency / offseason awards continues, and we'll start this next group of awards with the Illmatic Award, where we'll find out who established themselves as the best team post-free agency. The nominees for this award are the New York Knicks, the Houston Rockets, the Los Angeles Clippers, and the Denver Nuggets. You've heard enough about 3 of these teams, but we do have a fresh face here in the New York Knicks, who just made the conference finals fair and square. While acquiring Jordan Clarkson off the buyout market and signing Gershon Yabusele aren't the most timeline-shattering acquisitions, they are indeed 2 players that give the Knicks greater depth, something that they struggled with this past season. Since being traded to the Jazz in December 2019, Jordan Clarkson gradually emerged as the J.R. Smith, Jamal Crawford kind of sixth man, the actual award he won in 2021. He was an absolute spark plug, a quick and shifty 3-level scorer, and man, if you remember that 2021 playoff run, there were some shots off the dribble that made you just scratch your head like, how in the world did that go in? And while Clarkson hasn't been at that supreme level, he still is very much an aggressive impact scorer. And funny enough, I compared him to J.R. Smith, I compared him to Jamal Crawford, and these are also guys that played for the Knicks at some point in their careers. Clarkson will give the Knicks some much needed offense off the bench. One of the weaknesses I believe the Knicks carried was that they didn't have anyone outside of Jalen Brunson to consistently create offense off the dribble. The closest player they had to that was Cam Payne, and he isn't on the level of Jordan Clarkson. That wasn't Miles McBride's role. That darn sure wasn't Josh Hart's role. It's not the kind of player OG Anunoby is, and neither really is Mikal Bridges. Although I felt like they should have included him in the offense a lot more in games down the stretch in the playoffs. But case in point, Jordan Clarkson should be able to bring the same punch to New York that he did in Utah and some of his situations prior. My fear with this acquisition, though, is that while he'll have plenty of exciting moments with the Knicks, he may not be on the floor as much as he would like to be due to defensive situations. But who knows? With Mike Brown in the picture now, maybe that changes. Maybe they even close games with Jalen Brunson, Jordan Clarkson, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Karl Anthony Towns. If Tibbs was in the picture, it probably wouldn't happen like that. But with a new coach, you have to anticipate seeing new strategies. All right, last season it seemed that they valued Josh Hart's rebounding and defense, yet he became very non-existent on offense at times, and Brunson seemed to be the only one in attack mode offensively. Having Clarkson out there as an emergency button may be better for them while still having defenders out there in Bridges and Anunoby. That's just my thought process. Not to say that there's one right answer or that it's the absolute best method, but it's just something to look at come next season. Either way, I love the Clarkson pickup for a team that just made a deep playoff run. As for Gershon Yabusele, I mentioned last year how he suddenly became the Sixers' backup center simply because of how impactful he was on both ends, but definitely on that offensive side as a small ball center. Again, despite being just 6'7", 6'8"-ish, he is a strong guy that doesn't get moved easily. He has a more than respectable 3-point shot at 38%. He can finish strong at the rim. And if you watch some of them Sixer games, I'll say it again, there were some games he was the second best player. Granted, injuries certainly played a factor, but trust when I tell you, he earned every penny he was due to get this summer after being out of the league entirely. Remember, the NBA has reached the point in its cycle where higher effort role players matter again. Stars alone are no longer carrying teams to championships. You can make a lot of money in this league being a star in your role, and it looks like Gershon is trying to do that in the Big Apple. Now, I won't lie, I didn't think New York was best for him at first. I felt like his minutes would go down after a season where he genuinely proved he could stick around in the NBA this time. But again, I had to remind myself of their added depth and versatility now. If Cat gets played off the floor, or both he and Mitchell Robinson are in foul trouble, running a small ball lineup with Yabusele at the 5 wouldn't be a new situation for him. And given his skill set, it might not be a bad idea to sprinkle that in throughout the season. Given the state of the Eastern Conference, it's certainly going to be one of the Knicks' best chances to make the finals this next season. And adding these 2 players to a rotation that was once 7, 8 guys should put them in a similar situation, if not what they hope is a better situation than the past season. Now, I've spoken about the Rockets a lot already. Again, just after building a roster of high-effort defenders and role players, they were rewarded with one of the best go-to guys in Kevin Durant, and still Şengün has plenty of room to grow as a finisher. We'll see how he improves this season. Jabari Smith just got paid, so he'll be hungry to prove that he's worth the bag. And remember what I said in the playoff preview. One of the bigger weaknesses that the Houston Rockets had was their lack of spot-up shooting. And while they showed flashes of success in that area, they had one of the worst three-point shooting percentages despite being one of the better teams in the league. But this year, outside of Kevin Durant's ability to catch and shoot, they acquired Dorian Finney-Smith, who shot a career-high 41% from deep this past year. Opportunity knocks for Reed Shepherd, right, who has been known to get up his share of shots from beyond the arc. He didn't shoot great at 33% in 52 games. Again, rookies always have to get used to the farther three-point line in the NBA, but and of course that's bound to happen with fluctuating minutes throughout the season, so it makes sense. And keep in mind, though, he did shoot a ridiculous 52% from deep in his lone college season. And just in case you're wondering, well, Des, the college three-point line is closer. He should be that efficient, and he came off the bench. He should absolutely be shooting the lights out, especially if he's getting a lot of open looks. In 3 G League games last year, he averaged 42% from deep, with his first game shooting 3 of 7, the second 4 of 11, and then the last game was 8 of 19. So at the end of the day, he gonna get them threes up, and has the tendency to be more accurate with it. The potential is there, and I'm sure he'll be happy to take wide open jumpers, courtesy of Kevin Durant double teams and Amen Thompson driving kicks all day long. All right, while yet to be proven, this team has plenty of potential. And similarly, just as long as the Clippers stay healthy, I think they have the potential to be one of the best teams in the West. Again, if they indeed get Chris Paul and Brad Beal, an already strong team will get even stronger. If they can keep the defense-first mindset that they had this past season and combine it with an offense that should be even more fluid and more dynamic, they're going to be a problem too. More so in the playoffs than the regular season, I would presume, anticipating the hurdles that they'll have with health. But, obviously most notably with Kawhi Leonard and Bradley Beal. But for the most part, they should be a legit contender. And lastly, the Denver Nuggets nearly got past the OKC Thunder, but they succumbed due to lack of shooting and a shorter rotation. They fixed those problems. Again, they addressed those weaknesses this offseason. I would like to see them prioritize that backup center. Again, prioritize playing Valanciunas and working him in the offense and things of that nature. But again, with all their acquisitions and situations in mind, I fully expect them to present another challenge to come out the West next year, because if they can do what they did last year with noticeable weaknesses and shortcomings, this year, if all is well and all is healthy, they can be just as good and hopefully better. And while I wish I could give the Illmatic award to all of these teams, only one can get the virtual hardware. And that team is the Denver Nuggets. The Knicks are fun. I know the Knicks are fun, but I'm tired of the Knicks always being fun. I want them to be legit. And right now, yes, everything points to them being the best team out east, but I feel like some of these West teams are still better than them. Houston, I've sang their praises all episode, but they have to show that they have indeed improved their spot-up shooting and that those young guys are ready to step up in a new year. The Clippers, the moves at the time of this recording have yet to fully manifest, but again, their issue may be the load management that they'll endure throughout the season. So we may not really see their potential till around the end of the season, post All-Star break, things of that nature. And I just think after Denver, again, after they nearly beat OKC, who went on to win the championship, the fact that they addressed their weaknesses gives me every reason to believe that they are the best and most cohesive team post-free agency. It's not to undermine what Houston did, but I just think the Nuggets won't need a lot of figuring out to do. They got a lot of those plug-and-play players that are just going to know out the gate what their role is and be able to commit to it early. So, like I said, some players on Houston will have to adjust to new roles and opportunities. The Knicks will be adjusting to a new coach. The Clippers will need their key players to be healthy for a longer period of time. I just think Denver will be able to go into the regular season knowing what is needed from each and every player on the roster and go full throttle. Again, they just look like the best team that made moves this offseason, and so for me, they get the Illmatic award. Now, similarly, we usher in the Fuji-La Award, virtually given to the team that made the most improvement with the offseason moves they made. So I understand there could have been a lot of crossover here between the Dr. Dre Award, the Illmatic Award, and this award, but understand I wanted the Fuji-La Award to be more about the leap the roster made and not necessarily 100% of just how close they are to contention. So for example, while the Rockets have certainly improved, what about teams like Charlotte or even New Orleans who supplemented key draft picks and offseason moves? Again, I know those might be more controversial, but I kind of see that there is a lane for them. You could in some way say they improved. I think it's a lot of fuzziness going on, but you could kind of make the argument that they improved. Obviously, we'll have yet to see what it actually looks like, but that's just my point. Think about it more in that way. I wanted to show love to some teams who improved, even if they aren't considered contenders in their conferences. So that said, I did have to boil the nominees down to the Charlotte Hornets, the Atlanta Hawks, once again, the Los Angeles Clippers, and the Orlando Magic. Now, this is a very interesting group right here. Okay, let me start with the Orlando Magic. They successfully addressed two major holes they had this past year: shooting and playmaking. Desmond Bane and Tyus Jones are generally both 40% three-point shooters, which should help improve their dead last three-point shooting ranking. Rookie Jace Richardson, who they drafted, shot 41% in college, so while I'm not sure how much he'll be included in the Magic's regular season rotation, they drafted a kid that can help their shooting woes as well. And just like I said in the previous episode, Desmond Bane's ability to put the ball on the floor and be a long ball threat that can attack the basket also should bring a real nice dynamic to their offense that often got stagnant in the playoffs because they couldn't shoot nor have someone to put pressure on the defense outside of Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner. Desmond Bane certainly seems like the perfect piece to put opposite of those two guys. Additionally, Tyus Jones, as a genuine, more old-school floor general, was the exact point guard Orlando needed. They had a lot of guards that were either score-first or more combo guards. Anthony Black, he's 6'7", and he was heralded more for his defense. So while they thought he could be the point guard, it didn't really pan out that way. Jalen Suggs really started to find his footing more and more in this league. But to me, and this is just me, he is a lot closer to an Alex Caruso type of player, although he's more talented. I just think he's a lot closer to that than being a true floor general or like a game manager, impact point guard. I think a lot of his value is in the dirty work, the defense, things of that nature. Cole Anthony was always more of a spark plug, yet struggled with forcing the issue a lot of times. And so it even got to a point where the Magic were playing Corey Joseph more because they knew they needed a more traditional floor general on the court. They were trying to get as close as they could to a true point guard as possible. And it was in the form of Corey Joseph. And even then, Corey Joseph was never really elite in that role. He had a lot of backup roles starting his career in San Antonio and then going to Toronto. So it wasn't always, it was the point guard situation was very, very shaky. So in comes Tyus Jones, who for the last few years has tried to save teams that had point guard holes. He's been among the best point guards in the league when it comes to assist to turnover ratio the last several seasons. He makes the right plays and rarely turns the ball over. And in the playoffs, you desperately need guys who can control the pace, control the tempo, and take pride in game management. Tyus is a traditional point guard in that regard, and I'm so excited to see how he impacts the Orlando Magic because they finally got the kind of point guard they've been looking for. So while I don't even think the Orlando Magic made this huge quantum leap, sometimes it is these simple moves that have major impact, and I think the Magic made some noticeable improvements to their roster that should bring greater success, hopefully, this upcoming season. All right, let's briefly talk about the Los Angeles Clippers yet again, who are pretty much in this perfect position to acquire NBA champion and really good interior defender Brook Lopez, athletic forward John Collins, veteran scorer Brad Beal, and future Hall of Fame point guard Chris Paul, all in one offseason. That alone is improvement. Okay, like I said before, this is a great situation for Brook Lopez in what is likely the final stage of his career. John Collins is able to return to a playoff team that definitely needed his rebounding and athleticism inside. Brad Beal is a real nice replacement for Norman Powell. Maybe not perfect, but real nice. Chris Paul is the exact kind of point guard they need for the playoffs. We all saw how James Harden once again unfortunately froze up in a game 7 and struggled to overcome the Nuggets' ball pressure defensively. We saw how Chris Dunn was spectacular for them defensively all season long, but just couldn't provide much on the offensive end when it really mattered. And we saw how Ben Simmons just doesn't have a shot button on his video game controller. So a secondary playmaker became a glaring weakness during the most important time of the year. The playoff does that sometimes. It exposes your weaknesses, and it did that for the Clippers. So even at 40 years old, Chris Paul is still a great solution for that problem. He can still get to his spot in the mid-range, still put pressure on the defense and make plays for his teammates as well as himself. It's just really hard to take a player and a competitor like him out of a game because of his skill set. So I expect the Clippers to have an even better flow to their offense, especially in the minutes James Harden is not on the floor. Again, that was a big problem for them last year. So and having these guys, Lopez, Collins, Beal, who can all shoot threes, gives them so much to work with in various offensive situations like pick and rolls, pick and pops, handoffs, and off-ball cutting. Again, and I don't want it to get twisted either with John Collins. He's coming off a year where he shot 39% from three. I know he isn't on, we don't think of him as this great shooter. We don't think of him as this great stretch big, but he was efficient as heck last year. So hopefully he can bring that to this situation as well. The Clippers already had a nice rotation last year, and it'll be nice to see how these additions make it even better for this next season. On to the Atlanta Hawks. I'll keep it brief once again since I broke down a lot earlier, but for them to finish as a 9th seed this past season, they should easily make the highest climb up the standings as long as they have a healthy season. But I don't want it to get lost that this team still made some real nice improvements despite health being the main reason they couldn't make the playoffs. They strengthened their big men depth, pairing Onyeka Okongwu with Kristaps Porzingis, as they'll be able to share the court and sub in for one another. So there's some versatility there when it comes to lineups. Porzingis gives them multiple options offensively with pick and pop, pick and roll, mid-range game. Is a really good shot blocker on defense. They add some shooting with Kennard and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, an extra defender in Nickeil Alexander-Walker as well. But he will also now have the opportunity, I think, to do a little bit more offensively than we sometimes saw in Minnesota. So that's a plus as well, especially after them losing Karis LeVert. This is a great opportunity for him to step in and say, okay, I can kind of fill that role too. You know, if you might have slept on that in Minnesota, but I can bring that to Atlanta. So I think them and Orlando, they're going to be fighting for that 3rd seed in the East, maybe the 4th seed as well. And then last but certainly not the least, the Charlotte Hornets. Now, how I feel about them is very similar to how I feel about the New Orleans Pelicans. Health is a must to see the true harvest that they are capable of reaping, but they have a solid, fun group on paper. We know how electrifying LaMelo Ball can be as a scorer and as a passer. We saw how Brandon Miller showed flashes of his all-star potential before his injury. We saw how Miles Bridges can still get 20 a game as an athletic inside-out threat. We saw Trey Mann improve his scoring abilities after spending a whole summer studying 2001 Allen Iverson, right? And we saw the contributions of role players like Josh Green, Seth Curry, Josh Okogie. Like they had some solid moments. But again, the primary issue was health. LaMelo missed time. Grant Williams only played 16 games. Trey Mann only played 13 games. Brandon Miller only played 27 games. Only 6 players played over 50 games on this Charlotte Hornets roster. And you can probably only name half of them. Because I know I wasn't able to until I looked it up. You probably can only name half of them. If you can name all of them, congratulations, you really know ball. But these guys are Moussa Diabate, Josh Green, Seth Curry, Miles Bridges, Nick Smith Jr., and Tidanje Salone, the rookie last year. Again, probably butchered his name. I apologize. But those are the 6 players that played over more than at least 50 games. And in fact, they all played at least 60. 2 of those guys were starters. That can't happen if you want to win in this league. So I say all that to say, I felt like the Hornets went into the offseason like, okay, we need to get role players that are going to fit in a best case scenario where all of our main pieces are healthy, but will also still contribute in a worst case scenario where when we hit the injury bug again, we still got guys that's ready to contribute. And so that's why I think they bring in Colin Sexton, a guy that can coexist with LaMelo's up-tempo style, but also keep our scoring charge if we're shorthanded. Likewise, here comes Spencer Dinwiddie, who is capable of starting and coming off the bench. Then you look at the draft, getting Colin Kneppel 4th overall, who a lot of people said even after the NCAA tournament that he probably had the best feel for the game out of anyone in his class. And even watching interviews of this kid, he sounds like he's got real genuine basketball knowledge. He sounds like he's a little bit of an old soul and has already acknowledged the importance of him being a player that plays off 2 feet to make up for his lack of athleticism. So I like the pickup there. 41% from 3 in college, but isn't limited to catch and shoot. He has some craftiness and wisdom to him, which I think is the exact kind of player that the Hornets were trying to bring in. It's time for a culture change there. We got our athleticism. We got our fun personalities. We got all this electrifying basketball. Now we need to get more cerebral gentlemen up in here, and I think Con Kneppel is one of those players. And that's also why, after trading almost all of their big men away, they draft 7-footer Ryan Kalkbrenner from Creighton, who averaged 19 and 9 and 2.7 blocks per game. So he's another guy that will get some real opportunity to thrive in Charlotte, initiate fast breaks, protecting the rim, and serving as a low post option as well. And he's an older rookie. So since he stayed in school, he's going to bring some extra polish and maturity that most older rookies tend to bring to their team. So I thought that was a great pickup as well. So overall, while still a younger team, I like that the Hornets seem to lock in on reliability this offseason. It wasn't about necessarily getting the talent, but more about getting the right fits. More about changing the culture. And if they can stay healthy, I'd like to think that they have a chance at a play-in spot. But again, big if here. Big if. I know I said it last year. That's why I'm a little hesitant. I thought they would return to the play-in spot, but they didn't. So hopefully this year, I'm right. But all of that said, who takes home the Fuji-La Award? Well, after much thought and consideration, the most improved team post-free agency to me is the Los Angeles Clippers. Whew, that was a little bit harder than I thought, but hear me out. I nearly picked Orlando because similarly to Atlanta, the only reason they were an 8th seed this past season is because they had so many injuries throughout the season. But they definitely improved in areas they needed to improve the most. I didn't pick the Hawks because so much of their improvement is reliant on the health of their team. But again, they brought some really good players in. Charlotte is more on the sleeper side. They are definitely my sleeper pick. So I didn't have that much confidence picking them to win the award, especially knowing how much the East will shift due to injuries to Tatum and Halliburton. And the fact that the Bulls won't be good this upcoming year, I don't anticipate my Bulls being that good. A window might open for maybe a last play-in spot or two. So I would like to see them get that spot, like I said. But again, they got to stay healthy. So I went a bit safer with the Clippers. Again, assuming all of these transactions happen the way that it's supposed to happen. I just think their improvements are not just based off the names they got, but the way each of those skill sets that those guys bring are necessary for this Los Angeles Clippers team. Again, due to a stacked Western Conference, they're probably only going to jump from the 5th seed to the 4th seed. With all the low management and things of that nature, I find it hard to believe that they'll be better than OKC, Houston, and Denver. But if they can get to the playoffs healthy, the roster that they're due to put together is much better than what they had this past year. But real talk, I wish I could just give all these teams the Fuji-La Award because that was a tough group. I may look calm on the surface, but that was tough. All right, you didn't see me drafting my notes and things of that nature, giving these awards out. There were moments I was just sitting by my computer just thinking like, man, I could go this way, I could go that way. It's a lot. Even teams that I haven't mentioned. Shout out to the Detroit Pistons who made some solid moves and things of that nature. Like, it's a mess, but yes, Fuji-La Award goes to the Los Angeles Clippers, especially because they came in clutch before I made this episode. Moving forward, it's time for the One Hit Wonder Award, where we acknowledge who could be the best player with a 1-year deal. The nominees for this award are Anthony Simons, Colin Sexton, Tyus Jones, and CJ McCollum. Let's start with CJ McCollum. Now, CJ is set to be a free agent after this upcoming season, so with him being traded to the Wizards this summer, it set up the perfect opportunity to be a one-hit wonder this year. He may be turning 34 in September, but in 12 NBA seasons, he's averaged at least 20 points for the last 10 of them. And in case you forgot, he actually dropped 50 points this past season, funny enough, against his new team in the Washington Wizards, so he's still got plenty of buckets to give out when necessary. His handle allows him to get wherever he wants. He's one of the shiftiest ball handlers in the league still, one of the better mid-range scorers in the league still, can shoot threes off the dribble and spot up. And regardless of how you feel about his role in the current CBA, the Wizards add another great veteran in a locker room that could surely use his wisdom. That said, all of these qualities are the exact reasons why you think he would either find a new home by the deadline or wait till next summer to help out a contender. With the Wizards acquiring so much young, exciting talent through the draft and everything the last couple of seasons, I wouldn't be surprised. I would be surprised if this becomes a situation where CJ stays put, especially with Chris Middleton deciding to stick around and opt in to his deal as well. So either way, whether he decides to stay put or go to a contender depends on the kind of season that he has. And then with that in mind, I actually want to jump into Anthony Simons because he's essentially in the situation that seemed a little more ideal for a guy like CJ McCollum. While it seemed like Anthony Simons was linked to teams trying to take the next step, like Orlando, for instance, the Celtics went ahead and picked him up as an insurance policy for losing Jason Tatum for the year. Simons was able to learn a lot from both Lillard and McCollum during his time as a Trailblazer, mirroring a lot of the go-to moves that Damian Lillard uses and developing a lot of the mid-range game that we've seen from CJ McCollum. So I think he got the best of both worlds being around those guys. And it allowed him to turn into a streaky 20-point per game scorer that was due for a bigger opportunity elsewhere. And that place ended up being Boston. Now, again, rumor has it that Brad Stevens has something up his sleeve with Simons. He can try to flip him for another player either soon or during the midseason deadline, or keep him and bring him into the mix of a Celtics core that is still pretty young and will look even more dangerous once Tatum returns from injury. I don't know what all this talk is that the Celtics should, kind of retool their roster, or what's the thing with Jaylen Brown, or trade Simons. I really think they should keep this so when Tatum comes back, you're still in a real good spot contention-wise. Maybe I'm tripping. Maybe it's the whole second apron thing. They're trying to watch the money. It's not even the on-court stuff. It's literally the financial reasons. I don't know, but I think like the Celtics should really sit tight because, I feel like I'm one of the few people that actually like what they potentially can do, especially once Tatum comes back. But no matter what happens, with 1 year left on his deal, we can expect that he will be trying out for other teams around the association or proving to the Celtics that he's worth keeping around. So it'll be a big year for him individually. And then next in line is Colin Sexton. All right, personally, I gotta admit, I didn't like the idea of the Hornets signing Sexton and Spencer Dinwiddie to go along with LaMelo Ball and Trey Mann. Those are four guards who love to prioritize scoring, and while it sounds fun when you read it off the paper, I believe it's too many like-minded guards in one place. Sure, maybe it allows LaMelo to focus more on being a floor general than a 30-point per game scorer, and maybe it's Charlotte bracing themselves for potential injuries that they have been known to experience the last few seasons, and in that regard, it makes sense. Additionally, Dinwiddie and Sexton are under contract for just one season, so either one of them, if not both, can be flipped at the deadline or move on to better teams next summer should they garner enough interest from other teams. That said, Sexton is a guard who plays with a lot of competitive fire and relentless scoring ability, attributes the struggling Hornets desperately need in their locker room. They need a kick in the butt, they need a fire, and that guy, I think Colin Sexton is one of the perfect guys for that kind of environment. It's unfortunate that he hasn't turned into the defender some of us thought he would develop into, but in this league, scoring is the main attraction. The name of the game is basketball. You got to put that ball in the basket, and Sexton gives the Hornets a backup combo guard that they've struggled to acquire in recent seasons. I expect him to provide a much-needed boost while possibly trying out for a contender, looking for a scoring punch as well. Though I may not like the situation that much on paper, it is a solid opportunity for Colin Sexton at this point in his career. He's still very young, 26 years old, plenty of career left. And who knows, if the Hornets can really turn a corner this year, maybe Sexton will become an important part of their future and culture. But after some years playing with teams that have struggled to make the playoffs, you gotta presume that eventually he's going to want to be in a winning environment. So it's going to be a big 1 year for him as well. And then the last nominee, Tyus Jones. He's the one that I am most confident that if he really helps the Magic, he'll re-sign and stay for a much longer period of time. I really want him to find a home. I think the other three guys, they seem to be exploring. But Tyus Jones, however, has been going to teams that need his services. The point guard in this day and age is like the quarterback in football. And understand, before when we made that comparison, it was from a leadership standpoint, right? The point guard needs to be as close to the coach. They need to be the on-court coach, on field, the quarterback on-field coach. Like it's a lot of similarities. But now, not only is that comparison from a leadership standpoint, but it's from a job security standpoint. Everybody has a point guard now. Some teams even have established backup point guards. So when the Wizards had an open spot, he went. When the Suns were hoping to fill the void Chris Paul left, he went. And now with the Magic in need of a point guard, it just seemed like there's only one, there's a Tyus Jones sized hole for the Orlando Magic, and he went there. So, here he comes ready to serve. And like I said, I'm all for players finding homes in the NBA, because who wants to jump from team to team all the time? This is his third team in 3 seasons now. But I'm also not mad at Tyus for running to the first team that needs a point guard. It's the reason why he has the value that he has, because those jobs aren't as abundant as they once were. This is a great opportunity once again to find a home and help a team win. The Wizards, they were losing. The Suns, it didn't work out. They're retooling. But Orlando, they're actually on the rise. And like I said earlier, they have been looking for a floor general with his exact skill set. Shoot the three efficiently, run the offense, make smart decisions, manage a game, keep the turnovers low. I'm excited to see what he looks like on the Magic. But of course, while all these guys are some great one-hit wonders, only one can have the virtual honors, and that player is Ann Simons. If the Celtics do keep him, and he has a nice year, it's a win-win for him. He'll either be a part of a championship organization long-term or have the chance to pursue that with another team. I know there are slim chances right now of the Celtics keeping him. We'll see. I know they finally announced it officially that he's with the team, so we'll see how it goes. But it was my understanding that they were hoping to shed his salary so they could retain Luke Cornett and Al Horford. But by the looks of things, they won't have neither one of those guys. Luke Cornett went to the Spurs, and Al Horford is looking at the Warriors or even retirement. So to me, at that point, well, you might as well pay Ant Simons. You might as well keep him around, knowing that you won't have Tatum, just to see what happens. And at least by the deadline, if anything, if you really want to flip him. Like, they could really use his scoring punch while they're superstar rehabs. So I'm a big fan of the Ant Simons move. I think a lot more than the average person is. But woo, already we are 5 awards down now, and you better sit tight because there are just 2 more left. Thoughts on the Illmatic, Fuji-La, and One Hit Wonder award selections? Do you agree with those selections? If not, who would you pick and why? I'm all ears. Be sure to comment your thoughts on YouTube or the socials, but while you do that, I'm going to take a quick break, but get ready to dive into the Underground and the Underdog awards next on Hip to the Games. What's up? I'm Desmond, and I'm the host and creator of Hip to the Games, a podcast from 19 Media Group. From hot topics across the NBA, how can you say we done with the 80s or we done with the 90s, yet that's who we learned from? To album reviews and song breakdowns and everything in between, I take immense pride in genuinely appreciating the brilliance of basketball and hip-hop's past and present. If you too love the game of basketball and the game of rap, that means you're hip to the games. But no matter where you fall on that spectrum, I'm sure you'll find your place in the H2DG family, and I encourage you to join the fun. He has a little more knuck if you buck, if you will. Every other Friday on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube, courtesy of the home team, 19 Media Group. Welcome back to the home stretch of this week's episode of Hip to the Games, where we end with the final 2 awards of the Offseason Free Agency Awards special. And the next award is the Underground Award, which goes to the most underrated acquisition of the summer. We all got them underground hip-hop artists and albums that we love. It's time to do the same on the NBA side. And boy, do we have some good nominees here. George Niang, Cam Whitmore, Luke Kennard, and Gershon Yabusele. Now, I want to start with George Niang because that dude is a Boston Celtic. Hear what I'm saying. Notice I didn't just announce him as a member of the Boston Celtics, but he, as a basketball player, embodies everything a Boston Celtic should possess. He wants to win. He plays with grit. He's not afraid to play a little feisty, often getting under the skin of opponents, and he can shoot the pill. In the last 7 seasons, he's finished 6 of those seasons with at least a 40% three-point percentage. And we all know how much the Boston Celtics value the three ball. George Niang fits like a glove. Additionally, the most underrated part of his game is his ability to attack the basket. It's not anything crazy, not anything athletic, but just the simple fact that he's not limited to three-pointers and he can fake a handoff or even post up smaller defenders and finish closer to the basket. It's a necessary skill set that keeps him on the floor for reasons outside of being a shooter, because shooters miss. So you got to bring something else. And he brings, like I said, toughness, grit, and it's nice to know that he can take it to the hoop on occasion. When he knocks down a few, he can pump fake, drive, finish, keep the ball moving. Again, all of that should fit right with how the Celtics play basketball. And as somebody who can play either forward position, this means that thinking big picture, he can play with both Tatum and Brown or either one of them as they get staggered throughout a game. He's no stranger to playing on playoff teams, as he's had some contributing minutes in Utah, Philadelphia, and Cleveland prior to this Celtics role that he should have. So, you know, I think this Boston role is the same one that he's had most of his career anyway, so it's not anything crazy. Just a great pickup for Boston, and honestly one of my favorites of the offseason. The minute he got traded, I said, this dude screams Boston Celtic. They'd be crazy to move on from him, in my opinion. Next up is Cam Whitmore. Admittedly, I was a bit disappointed that the Rockets moved on from him. It seemed as if they wanted their 10-man rotation to be Van Fleet, Shepard, Thompson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Tari Eason, Kevin Durant, Jabari Smith, Alperen Sengun, Steven Adams, and Clint Capella, which means they're leaning heavily on their front court depth, right? I was hoping, though, that they would still find a way to sprinkle him in as a bigger shooting guard, giving him small doses to provide a scoring spark, but obviously they just didn't see it that way. So instead, they help him out and they send him to his hometown team in the Washington Wizards, where there will be greater opportunity to grow his game and get minutes on a young team that's quietly on the rise. And what stands out to me is that he can jump out the gym. He's athletic as heck. He can finish at the cup, but he's also got a solid three-point shot at around 35, 36. It's not bad. It's more than respectable. And a decent dribble pull-up in the mid-range area, which he should have a lot more opportunities to do in Washington. And again, he's still young, so these skills are going to be nurtured and should become even better for him. But he's an explosive talent. That's the word that comes to mind. He's an explosive talent, and that's the exact kind of player who should fit well around guys like Alex Sarr, Bilal Coulibaly, and of course, learn from those veterans like Chris Middleton and CJ McCollum. The Wizards have some real talented scorers on the wings. Like when you think of Chris Middleton, CJ McCollum, Bub Carrington has real nice mid-range game, Cam Whitmore now, and you could throw in AJ Johnson in there too as a combo guard. There is definitely some spark plugs to work with in Washington, and Cam Whitmore will have what should be his best opportunity yet to show what he can do in this league in the future. Then we got Luke Kennard. I mentioned him earlier, how he's a super elite shooter who has hung around 43 to 45% from deep most of his career so far. Again, emphasis on super elite because that is crazy accuracy. He's got more confident in his off the dribble game the last few seasons. And again, like I said, he can be used in pick and roll scenarios, DHOs, the whole nine. And again, the reason why he's a nominee for this award is because how in the world did the NBA let Trae Young get one of the most accurate shooters in the league? I find it hard to believe Luke will get major minutes on the Hawks with a healthy rotation, especially because of his defensive weaknesses. But man, with the variety of playmaking they have on that roster, the versatility they have on that roster, and how much of that is spearheaded by Trae Young's playmaking, he and Luke Kennard should have this symbiotic relationship where they just make each other's lives easier. This is a dope fit for Luke Kennard. And then lastly, Guerschon Yabusele. Again, just briefly, because I went into detail earlier in the show, but a guy who can play the 4 and serve as a small ball 5, strong, physical guy, can space the floor, and is a doggone boulder going to the basket. Rarely do you see bigs try to block his shot at the rim because he's such a strong finisher with a head of steam. If you're a Knicks fan, think energy. This is an energy move. While he's real solid in pick and pop situations, being able to knock down the 3, but also find a way to pump fake, get to the basket. And keep in mind too, he thrives best in the open court. looking for those fast break dunks. On a team that has really good perimeter defenders on the wings, guys who can get steals, having a tight end, if you will, like Yabusele to finish fast breaks is a really nice asset to have. I know this past year the Knicks emphasized Josh Hart so much because of his ability to get out in transition. They wanted him to get the rebound and go. Well, now he has a partner in crime in Yabusele who's going to be looking for those opportunities. So again, it's the small ways in the offseason that you improve your team. And I really think that Yabusele, I had to sit with it for a little bit, but once I thought about it, that was a great pickup for the New York Knicks. It won't be the flashiest, and you may not even see it on an everyday basis, but I do think he is more than a solid role player for that team and what they're building. I'm a fan of all these guys' new situations, but I can only give the award to one of them, and the Underground Award goes to Georges Niang. I really wanted to go Cam Whitmore because he just has the highest ceiling of all the nominees, but I think he was also the cool pick, if you will. He's got the athleticism, he's got the game and everything, but my brain just kept going back to Georges Niang. Like, that is the epitome of the underground. Nothing about his game is flashy or highlight material, but if you watch the games, you see his impact. Just the epitome of an underground player and such an underground pickup for the Boston Celtics. Trading Kristaps Porzingis for him looks funny if you just go off names and resumes, but he's exactly the player that the Celtics could use, so I loved it. Congrats to Georges Niang for winning H2DG's 2025 Underground Award. And finally, we have one more award to give out, the Underdog Award, which is going to go to the offseason acquisition who has the most to prove this season. I had to end with a good one because these nominees are all in similar boats, if you ask me. Michael Porter Jr., DeAndre Ayton, Jalen Green, and Ty Jerome. All right, so let's just go in order and start with Michael Porter Jr. Michael Porter Jr. gave the Denver Nuggets 6 solid seasons as a key piece within their core. His contributions helped them win the 2023 NBA Finals. He was generally a 50% field goal scorer and a 40% three-point shooter. He was doing his thing. While often critiqued for having tunnel vision offensively, he stuck to his role fairly well and, to my knowledge, never complained, never asked for a trade. He even played through a shoulder injury in the playoffs this past season, so he was bought into Denver Nuggets basketball. I commend him greatly for that. That said, I believe Denver felt it was time to move on from him. While a very solid rebounder and shooter, he seemed to fall in love with threes very easily, wasn't great at making plays off the dribble, and didn't always look to make the extra pass or the right pass for that matter. And I kind of get it. When you have a guy like Nikola Jokic and a dynamic guard like Jamal Murray, it can be easy to feel like it's just not your job to do those things. But we saw how his teammates like Aaron Gordon, Christian Brown, Russell Westbrook, they helped keep the Nuggets in games due to their more all-around skill sets. And that is the leap we've been waiting for Michael Porter Jr. to take. And I think a lot of us knew deep down if he was going to take that leap, it wasn't going to be wearing a Nuggets jersey. So lo and behold, here he's presented with this new opportunity to play for a rebuilding Nets team, a team where Michael Porter Jr. won't be held to championship expectations and have more opportunities to score the ball. But again, with another high volume shot creator on the team in Cam Thomas, I can't say this is the best blend of a duo because they have similar attributes. They are high volume, tunnel vision scorers, which will look great when they're hot, but when they get cold, that's scary. And while they picked up a hefty amount of quality young players through the draft this year, I fear that this kind of roster is not going to influence Michael Porter Jr. to expand his playmaking skills. He may get better scoring off the dribble, but I believe he has to eventually prove that he can make the right plays. He can make the extra pass and have an impact on the game beyond threes. I know he's 6'10" and can shoot over anybody, but when watching him in the playoffs, there were moments where you wanted him to get an extra rebound here or there, or make an extra pass to the shooter, or attack the paint, make the defense collapse, and then hit the open man, and he just didn't do those things. I mentioned it in the conference finals preview episode. It just became clear that Michael had a more one-dimensional game, and I think that's exactly why they traded him for Cam Johnson, a high IQ guy who knows how to play the game the right way, and by no means am I trying to come at Michael Porter Jr. when I say that. You know, in the spirit of the Underdog Award, I just want to see him improve his game with a fresh start. He's been on a contender, he's won a championship, and the Brooklyn Nets are going to be eager for him to apply that wisdom and apply what he's learned about himself and what he's learned about winning basketball into their organization. And so he has to come correct. That's why I believe he has a lot to prove with this new situation. And then next up is DeAndre Ayton. If you paid attention to my solo YouTube channel, I made a video early in the regular season where I showed love to 5 old school low post players, and he was on that list. And while he is very skilled, he can play back to the basket, he can face up, while not very good at it, not very consistent, he can occasionally hit a three, but you can't bank on it. But it's something that he is capable of doing. He can catch lobs. It's just, he has all these tools and he just doesn't always put it together. And I think a lot of it, as basic as it is, I just think a lot of it is his motor. And that scares me a little bit, especially as a Los Angeles Laker, because I hate that the first thing I thought of when I saw the news that DeAndre Ayton picked the Los Angeles Lakers as his next team, my first thought was, it used to mean something to be a Los Angeles Laker. Like, sure, they needed a big man badly, and he will benefit tremendously playing with a guy like Luka Doncic and certainly LeBron James. But there are so many questions. Is he going to demand the ball on the block, especially with a mismatch? Is he going to settle for being a lob threat just because he's playing with Luka and Bron? Is he going to take pride in his defense? Is he going to protect the rim? And quite honestly, I fear that sometimes the answers to those questions are going to be no. Either DeAndre Ayton is going to be who he's always been or look to take a step up because he's wearing the purple and gold. And I hope it's the latter, because I don't want anyone to miss what I'm saying. I think DeAndre Ayton in some ways is the most hated. To be as skilled as he is the most hated at his position. He's one of the most hated. I think it's easy to clown on him and things of that nature. And I get it. You might say, well, Des, he makes it easy on himself to get clowned because he doesn't display a lot of the consistency we like to see from him. But again, I just think this is a real big situation for him. And going back to what I said, I think history and tradition matters, right? I would like to think LeBron is going to let him know what being a Laker is all about. These fans expect championships, and no matter what the roster realistically looks like, you have to play. You have to give an effort like that is the standard. I don't care if we start the season 2-10. We have to give an effort that we are trying to chase championships, plain and simple. Plain and simple. Now, let's look at this a little bit more optimistically, though. DeAndre Ayton has averaged a double-double every year he's been in the league. He shot at least 56% from the field in every season except one, and even that one season was just under 55%. The 2 seasons he shot over 60% was when Chris Paul was his point guard. So now imagine how he's got Luka Doncic with him this time on a team with Luka, LeBron, Austin Reeves. I'm not tripping if DeAndre Ayton only averages 14, 15 points a game. But my thing is, the Lakers just don't need his rebounding or his post presence. They need his rim protection as well. And while the numbers don't reflect him being as strong in that area, he has shown flashes of being a reliable rim protector. Again, it's just a everyday 82 game basis thing for DeAndre Ayton. Can he lock in and do that for 82 games wearing the purple and gold? The Lakers got to find a way to bring that out of him. Overall, like I said, I think a lot of people are hard on DeAndre Ayton, and I totally understand it. Everybody is not as understanding as I am, but I get where it comes from. To be the number 1 pick, 20 points, 12 rebounds, 2 blocks in college, having on and off seasons in the NBA and raising questions about his hustle and his effort, I understand. Oh yeah, he gets critiqued harder because he had higher expectations. He was drafted to be a man among boys, and he doesn't always show that. But he is skilled and has what it takes to play better than what we've often seen from him. Shoot, the fact that the Blazers, bought him out, not traded, but they bought him out. They bought out a 26-year-old former number 1 overall pick who in the grand scheme isn't a bad basketball player. Should be enough motivation for DeAndre Ayton to play with the biggest chip on his shoulder he's ever had this season. But it's not about what I think. It's more about what DeAndre Ayton believes about himself, and we will see that this season. Now, the third nominee is Jalen Green. You can basically put him in the DeAndre Ayton class of shooting guards at this point, right? I guess what's the trend everybody's doing? He's the DeAndre Ayton of shooting guards. I think you can do a little bit of that with Jalen Green. People thought he would have developed at a more rapid rate than he's shown. He's been very durable. He's an athletic finisher. He's got a crafty handle, real nice shot creation ability. But that said, he can be an inconsistent player as a scorer and struggles to impact the game beyond putting the ball in the hoop. That's his biggest thing. I said this in a previous episode. I think a lot of people want every athletic shot creating shooting guard to average 27, 5, and 5 and play good defense because traditionally that's what the best ones do. The guys who won championships at some point in their careers did that. Mike, Drexler, Kobe, Wade, etc. But breaking news, you can still be an effective shooting guard and not be excellent in all those areas. Sure, do I think Jalen Green could improve as a rebounder for his position? Absolutely. Do I think he should incorporate off-ball movement in his game? 100%. Do I think he can have more active hands on defense? Oh yeah. Should he look to improve his playmaking skills? Yup. Anthony Edwards has made a lot of these strides that you would like to see Jalen Green make. It's possible. But maybe getting traded was his wake-up call to do that. Hopefully, you would like to think so because the fact that it took the Rockets one playoff series to move on from him, ouch. It's a cold world, y'all. It's a cold world and the NBA is a business. It took one playoff series for them to be like, all right, yeah, we can't do this. Like, they had to believe that things weren't going to get better from this point on. I've seen plenty of basketball fans express similar sentiments that Jalen Green, after just 4 years, has already hit his ceiling as a basketball player, and that may very well be the case. You never know. As optimistic as I like to be, there's also that lane as well. But I really believe that this trade can be the kind of boost that Jalen Green needed to diversify his game and his skill set. And I'm not saying it will happen, but I do believe it can happen. Again, this dude was the second pick in the draft. He has all-star talent. To get traded after the first playoff run has to sting. While the Rockets made the right move, like I said, you trade for Kevin Durant 10 out of 10 times. If you're Jalen Green, that's got to light a little bit of a fire underneath you. And so he's got to prove that he can be more than just a bucket. If that's all he wants to be, cool. Contrary to the trolls on social media, there is nothing wrong with that. But as somebody who has the tools to be even better than that, why sell yourself short? If he stays in Phoenix, he can learn some of these things from Devin Booker. But if he gets flipped, you anticipate he'll have the chance to show Houston that they moved on too soon. Big year for Jalen Green. But for the finale, we got Ty Jerome of the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, first off, mad love to Ty Jerome. He played on 3 different teams in his first 4 seasons and never played more than 48 games due to injuries. Then in his 5th season, he only played 2 games due to a right ankle injury. But this past season, he played a career-high 70 games for the Cavs and averaged about 13, 2, and 3 on nearly 52, 44, 87 shooting splits in just 20 minutes. Nearly made the 50-40-90 club. And it's an impressive 50-40-90. It ain't just to get by, word to Talib Kweli, 50-40-90. This is a 52-44-87, right? That's just crazy shooting. Crazy shooting. A tremendous comeback year, and quite honestly, a career-saving season for Ty Jerome. That kind of persistence is extremely admirable, and he got paid this summer because of it. That said, like Jalen Green, I believe his playoff run impacted his job security with the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think it's pretty telling that the Cavs decided to trade for Lonzo Ball, who hasn't played more than 63 games in his career and just missed 2 consecutive seasons due to a severe knee injury, solely for his ability to, at his best, defend multiple positions, shoot the 3, have active hands, and make high IQ plays on both ends. Knowing that their biggest flaw this postseason was a lack of extra shot creation from role players like DeAndre Hunter and Ty Jerome, they still chose to bring in somebody who didn't necessarily fit that, but is going to do a lot of the other things that is going to bring a major impact to the team. And they let Ty Jerome sign elsewhere. Because at the end of the day, it looked like the playoffs got to him a little bit, which is understandable. It was his first playoff run in general and as a key contributor on a team that was expected to do a little bit more contending than they showed. While the 3-point shot was still nice at 39%, his field goal percentage went all the way down to 40% in the playoffs. Especially versus the Indiana Pacers, it seemed like he couldn't buy a bucket. So much so that Cleveland didn't feel the need to bring him back despite how impactful he was all regular season long. They kept Sam Merrill even. They kept Darius Garland, despite chatter that they should move on from him. And don't get me wrong, I was hyped to see Lonzo Ball get traded to the Cavs. I think it's a great pickup for them. They're going to benefit tremendously from it. But if you're Ty Jerome, you now got to prove that your near sixth man of the year season wasn't a fluke. Granted, he got his money, and he'll have a similar opportunity playing behind Ja Morant in Memphis, likely getting time at the 2 and the 1 spots as a combo guard. But the Cavs, they moved on like it was nothing. And apparently, it came out that they didn't even come to him with an offer. I think they were that scarred by his playoff struggles. Ty Jerome has to be looking to make his old team pay for letting him walk so freely after what was an otherwise special and efficient season. Man, while all these guys are worthy of the award, the winner of the Underdog Award is DeAndre Ayton. Michael Porter Jr., he has a new role for the first time in his young career. We'll cut him some slack. Jalen Green, he finished in second here for sure. Ty Jerome had his first really good season, so the pressure isn't boiling, I would say, but he does have a big chip on his shoulder. But DeAndre Ayton, that pressure is there. He's back on a team that hopes to be in the playoffs again. Again, he's playing for a franchise that is championship or bust. You know, people already see him as one of the weakest or more lackadaisical at his position. And of course, he's on America's basketball team. So if he thought he had pressure before, it's going to hit different levels this upcoming season. Again, he just has a lot of questions to answer, a lot of things to prove in this new situation, and he was a no-brainer to win this award. He's definitely got the most to prove, I feel like, out of these 4 guys. And after all of that, it's a wrap for the 2025 H2DG Offseason Awards. Just a quick recap of all the winners. Kevin Durant won the Hovito Award for Best Acquisition. The Rockets GM, Raphael Stone, won the Dr. Dre Award for Best Executive during the offseason. The Nuggets won the Illmatic Award for Best Team Post-Free Agency. The Clippers won the Fujila Award for Most Improved Team. Anthony Simons won the One Hit Wonder Award for Best Opportunity with a 1-year deal. George Niang won the Underground Award for Most Underrated Pickup, and DeAndre Ayton won the Underdog Award for the player with the most to prove in the upcoming year. I tried something new creatively, and I certainly hope you enjoyed the fun. Please let me know how I did. Let me know how you enjoyed it. And if you would like this to return in the future, as I would greatly appreciate that feedback. But with that, we have made it to the end of another Hip to the Games episode. From best teams, improvements, slept on players, and guys with something to prove, and of course, plenty of just general free agency offseason talk. This episode was jam-packed with analysis of some of the most intriguing offseason deals. But as always, these were just my thoughts, and now it's time to hear from you. You can tweet the show at Hip to the Games or tag me directly on Twitter and IG at DesmondPowell_ to share your thoughts on any of the topics discussed today or some of the topics that weren't discussed, as I would love to hear or read any of your thoughts on all the offseason moves so far. I simply want to say thank you for listening to another episode of H2DG, all for the love of the best combo there is. And of course, here's a huge shout out to you for being Hip to the Games. Peace out and God bless. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Hip to the Games, and if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit up the socials at DesmondPowell_ and at Hip to the Games on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok so you don't miss out on the fun. And please follow or subscribe to the show and leave a review on the podcast platform you're on right now, as your support is greatly appreciated.